Thanks for stopping by to check out this episode of Vintage Audio Review. In this episode, I'm going to talk about this Anthem Pre tube preamplifier. This was sold by a company called Sonic Frontiers in 1996 to 1997 time frame at a cost of $995 for the base preamplifier, and if you wanted the moving coil, moving magnet phono amplifier option, that was another $695. If you add those two up, you would be looking at a $3,200 preamplifier in today's money. It has a separate power supply to improve the performance of the unit, and we'll see how everything kind of connects in a little bit. We'll take a tour of the inside, the outside, and see how it performs all these years later. Here's a closer view of the Anthem Pre, and starting off at the right, here we have our on-off switch. Now, when it's in the off position, the power supply is still supplying power to the heaters of each of the tubes so that it warms up very quickly. This guy right here is a volume control. It is not detented, but it does have a nice, heavy, smooth feel to it. This is our muting operate switch, and it will mute the signal, but normally you would have it in the operate position. This is a balance control. It does have a center detent. This guy right here is our tape source switch. This is our input selector here. We have one for CD, tuner, auxiliary, and this particular one has the phono input. And the choice of moving coil or moving magnet cartridge is set by some switches inside, and you'll see that shortly. This obviously is the rear of the Anthem Pre. You can tell that all the inputs and outputs have gold-plated RCA jacks on them. Starting on the right, we have our inputs for the CD, tuner, auxiliary, and phono, and here is our three-way banana type phono grounding lug. Our tape monitor circuit are these guys here, and we do have two sets of preamp outputs, these guys right here. And this is our power supply connection point, and we'll see the power supply in just a moment. This is the business end of the Anthem Pre power supply. Nothing really special. It has the power output connector and then a standard 3-prong AC input connector. It does have a 5AR4 vacuum tube inside it, and it's part of the high voltage rectifier circuit along with a FET and a NPN transistor, if I remember the schematic correctly, but the rest of it is solid state other than that one 5AR4 tube, and that is the power supply. Here's the inside of the Anthem Pre. I just kind of wanted to show a little bit about what the build quality was and kind of what's inside it, and you can see that the build quality is first rate with the soldering and the board and the capacitors that they've chosen and the resistors. It is as good as I have seen on a preamplifier, that's for sure. I'm going to kind of go around and focus in on a few other things, but there are 6 tubes. I'm not sure which ones they are. And also, you probably can't tell, but the tubes are powered on. Let me cut the light. I cut the light, and hopefully you can see a glow of the tubes. Let me put it back. Even though the power on-off switch on the Anthem says off, it is applying a voltage to the heaters of each of the tubes. I would imagine just the heaters, so that they are ready to go when you turn it on. I'm going to show this back area. Hopefully it will focus. I wanted to focus a little bit on this back area by the switch right here. This is your input selector switch, this guy right here, and it's mounted right to the circuit board for the input. So all your inputs come in here, your phono, tape, etc., tuner, and they are switched very quickly, and that helps eliminate stray noise from getting in to the individual circuit. So it will be interesting to see how the isolation measures between channels and the inputs themselves. So that's kind of just a little quick tour. Let me go around to the front. I wanted to point out where the gain for the phono stage is set, and it's done with these two switches here. And if you are using a moving coil cartridge, you would want the high gain, which is 78 dB, and that would be over on this side. And for the low gain, which would be 61 dB, you would put it over here where it is now. Also of note are the two very high quality potentiometers for the volume control right here and the balance control right here. Here we have the THD SNR plot at 1 kilohertz with the volume control adjusted so that we have 0 dB gain. We are putting in a 2 volt signal and getting out a 2 volt signal. The THD is better than 0.03%. SNR is looking really good, above 82 dB, and the THD plus noise is looking very good at better than minus 71 dB. The THD specification for a 2 volt input is 0.1% or better, and we are doing better than that. For grins, let's look at the harmonics. So this is showing the harmonics for just the left channel, and this would be our fundamental. Our second harmonic, which would be the even harmonic, is higher than the third harmonic, which would be the odd harmonic. So oftentimes tube gear has the even order harmonics, at least the first couple, higher than the odd order harmonics, which is the case here. Here we have the frequency response of the Anthem Pre 1. Now I should note, unless I'm doing a phono input measurement, I am measuring from the CD input to the Preamp 1 output. There really is no difference between the two preamp outputs. And what we are seeing here is a very flat response. For the left channel, we're down maybe 0.25 dB at 20 kilohertz. For the right channel, it's probably pretty close to the same since it's a little bit lower. The channel balance between the two is within 0.05 dB, I would say. So it's looking really flat. The specification was plus or minus 0.5 dB from 10 hertz to 85 kilohertz. So it definitely would be meeting that requirement at 20 kilohertz. Here is the Anthem Pre 1's multi-tone response, and it's showing anywhere from about 11 to 15 bits of distortion-free range. Here we are looking at the crosstalk or channel separation or isolation between the left and right channels. In this case, I'm using the CD input. It has a 1 volt signal going into the left channel, and the right channel is terminated into a short. The specification was that at 1 kilohertz, it would be better than 75 dB. So at 1 kilohertz, we're, maybe minus 70 dB. So that's pretty close. And then it said at 20 kilohertz, it should be better than 65 dB. So that would be this point right here. And we're at about 55 dB down. So it's not too far away from the specification. Here we are looking at the isolation between two different inputs. In this case, it is between the auxiliary input and the CD input. The CD inputs are terminated into shorts, and a 1 volt signal is applied to the auxiliary input, and the CD input is selected. So what you're seeing is the amount of signal that's crossing over from the auxiliary input path to the CD path. You would obviously like that to be nothing, but in this case, we're anywhere from about minus, we'll say 45 dB to minus 50 dB at the high end of the band, and then in the mid band, you're getting more than 60, 70 dB of isolation between the two inputs. There was no specification for it. I just have been measuring this, and it's one of those things that's kind of interesting to know. What we are looking at here is the noise level of the Anthem Pre 1, and in this case, the CD input is selected, and its inputs are terminated into shorts, and you're kind of just looking at the noise of this unit. There is a specification that it needs to be at least 95 dB down from a 1 volt signal, which would mean the 0 dBV would be 1 volt signal, and 95 dB would be across this line here. So for the most part, we are meeting or exceeding that requirement. There's a few points here that are right at that 95 dB level, but I would have to say that this is one of the cleanest preamplifiers as far as noise that I have seen, if not the cleanest that I have measured so far. Here is the THD SNR plot at 1 kilohertz with a minus 40 dBV or 10 millivolt signal applied to the phono input. Now the phono input is set for the low gain or the moving magnet position. And at 1 volt, the specification was that it should be better than 0.35% THD, and it is definitely better than 0.35% THD. We're talking 0.02 and 0.04%. Also, the THD plus noise is anywhere from minus 60 to minus 66 dB, and the SNRs are either 61 dB or 70 dB, let's say, for the right channel. You can kind of see that over here. The left channel does have a higher noise level coming up. Now, also, we can see the gain is right around 41 dB, and we're getting a 1 volt output. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the volume control and the balance control as needed so that I've got my 48 dB of gain here and see if it makes any difference. All right, so now I've readjusted the balance and the volume control a bit so that I've got my 48 dB of gain. Didn't really change much here. The left channel is still worse than the right channel as far as the THD plus noise, and the THD is basically unchanged. This is really, really low. And the SNR for a phono stage, 62 dB, 60 dB is pretty good overall. Here we have the frequency response of the phono stage with the gain set to the moving magnet positions. And you can see that it is basically maybe at worst case plus maybe 0.7 of a dB, down 0.7 of a dB. And for the left channel and the right channel is very similar if it were centered here. The channels are balanced within 0.2 of a dB, I would say, across the band. So the specification was plus or minus 0.5 dB from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So it's pretty much meeting that specification requirement. Here is the noise of the phono stage with the phono stage inputs terminated into shorts, and the specification is that it should be better than 75 dB from the 0 dBV point, in which case we are definitely meeting it. Now, I do have the RIA curve applied, and I'm not certain whether or not that is how the measurement should be done. In this case, the spec didn't say so. If I turn that off, it changes the slope, in which case we are at least minus 60 dB down. So I'm just going to say that the RIAA should be on, and it makes it look better. But all in all, this is extremely clean for a phono stage. Normally you're going to get 60 hertz hum and 120 hertz hum noise spikes in it, but none of that in this. So the Anthem Pre 1 is an extremely clean preamplifier all the way around. For my listening test, I connected the Anthem Pre 1 to my Bryston 2B-LP power amplifier, of which I have done a video for. And that was connected to my Wilson Watt 3 Puppy 2 loudspeakers, of which there is also a video for. I used my recently acquired WIM Mini streamer as my source, feeding the auxiliary input on the Anthem Pre 1. And I was playing back CDs that I had ripped, so I'm playing back WAV files through the WIM Mini. I thought the sound of the Anthem Pre 1 was outstanding. I didn't hear it lack any bass or treble. I thought it had a wide soundstage. I mean, it sounded really, really good is all I can tell you. It was quiet. However, there was a period of time where I was getting a hiss out of the Anthem. It was not the Bryston. I terminated the inputs going into the Bryston and the hiss went away. So there was some interaction with the Anthem Pre 1 for a while where it had like a hissing sound if there was no music going into it. When we did some testing today with it, it was perfectly fine. So it tested as one of the lowest noise level units that I have run across. So I'm not really sure what was going on with this hissing, but even with the hissing, which was only noticeable when there was no music, you did not hear the hissing when the music was playing, but where there was no music playing, you could hear the hissing for a period of time during my checkout of the unit. It made a small pop when it was turned off. It didn't make any pop when it was turned on. A very small pop to the preamp. And other than that, it is a great unit. If you had the opportunity to pick one of these up, it's well constructed. This one does have the phono stage. I did not listen to that, but overall I think it's well constructed. It sounds really good, and you would be happy being the owner. Once again, I thank you for watching this video and would love to hear any comments you may have, And if you have not subscribed, please do so. If you like the video, please do so as well. And until next time, have a great day or night.